try to take care of some allergies. It was very interesting that we ended with a comment about profit. One of the things that my firm truly believes in is the intersection of three components that are necessary for any success, which is principles, passion, and profit. And in fact, we've turned down clients and refused to work with people who only pursue one and not all three. We believe that 21st century business is built upon relationships and built upon that intersection of profit, passion, and principles. They must exist or it doesn't work. Going to give you a little bit of introduction about myself. 5.5 years ago, I founded Synthenai because I looked around and what I found I didn't like, which was small and mid-sized businesses didn't have access to the same consultative frameworks that large-sized businesses. If you were a large-sized businesses, you could get expertise advice and hire one of the large consulting firms to help you in your business. But if you're in a small business, you didn't have access. Most of the consultants typically were in a Fortune 500 company for 30 years, which is great, but they often knew a very narrow skill set, and they couldn't help. So 5 years ago, I founded Synthenai to change the calculus of business success and failure and bring innovation around the world. Kind of what we say is we architect growth. We specifically do that through the fields of operation and finance. So this is all about internal process, and you'll see throughout the presentation what our point of view. We come with a very strong point of view and philosophy. So we are based in New York City, but for the last 9 months, not as long as Lars, but for the last 9 months I've been on my own tour around the U.S. because I wanted to find out where is innovation and entrepreneurship happening in the United States of America. And, you know, yes, there's a selfish profit reason driven for this. Where would Synthenai's message be received? But in doing so, I also got a key on innovation entrepreneurship that's happening in our country. So I'll just frame up the conversation. Like Lars, I don't like standing at a pedestal, but I have to, so I will deal with that. This is supposed to be conversational, so please don't wait for your questions until the end. If you're thinking anything at any time, blurt it out, raise your hand, let's have a conversation going, because that's where innovation comes from. Innovation is an exchange. It is not a one-way presentation. It is an exchange in building. At the end of the day, innovation takes something that was existing in the world, modifies it slightly, and introduces a new concept, product, or service. I'm going to start off just giving you, I'm geek about this, and I hope you guys are. I'm going to give you a little bit of a small business landscape, what is going on in the U.S. right now, and then I'm going to go into some frameworks for how small businesses operate. I will repeat the question into the microphone very slowly every time someone asks it. So just ask and I'll repeat it. So again, what Synthenai does is we go into a company and help their internal systems and process manage growth. So in doing so, we're doing how a company stewards its resources operationally and financially. So without any further ado, is that okay? I'm going to give you just some facts and figures. I know that can be boring. So here's a small, we're going to get into that. Here's the small business landscape. So question one is, what is small? Every country around the world actually has a different definition. I'm going to give you the U.S.'s definition. I actually just gave a presentation in Canada last month, Mexico next month. I usually tailor it, so I couldn't tailor it to all 19 countries, but eventually I'll have a slide that talks about global. But this is just U.S. So what is small? Well, in 1953, the Small Business Administration is formed, and they said it's an independently owned and operated and not dominant in its field of operation. Now, I don't know about you, but that is meaningless to me. I don't know what that means. Neither did the U.S. government, which is by the end of the 1950s, they started giving definitions. Right now, it's funny if you guys want a little bit of a laugh, at least if you're a business geek like me, go look up the definitions of small business. I'll give you one example. If you're a mushroom farmer, anybody here a mushroom farmer? Okay. Well, if you have sales over $750,000, you're considered a large business. But if you're a chicken farmer, do you have any chicken? No chicken farmers. $12.2 million. Another one, if you make airplanes, fly in the sky, 1,500 employees or less, you're a small business. Greater than 1,500, you're a large business. However, if you make space vehicles, you're a large company if you make over 1,000, if you have over 1,000 employees. I don't know about you, but space seems more complicated than, but I don't know. So the point is that the U.S. has tons of classifications, dozens of lists deep about what is small. So what's the general idea? Okay, well, here's the general idea. Roughly 500 employees, $10, $20 million, something in that range. That's roughly small business. Again, it varies by industry. You go around the world, completely different. You go to a country like India, it's more like 100 employees and a couple million in revenue because that's the majority of the business. 99.7% of all U.S. employer firms are represented by small to mid-sized enterprises. That's 99.9% of firms, but as anybody knows, there's a lot of firms that don't have employees. Even if you eliminate them out, there's still 99.7% of every firm in the U.S., and that translates around the world. So the vast, vast, vast majority of enterprises, firms, companies are small. So the 600,000 new businesses are formed per year on average, and in the U.S. there's about 27 million firms total organized at any given time. Anybody want to take a guess? How many are large? 14,000. Anybody else? No guesses? It's supposed to be conversational. Take a guess. 20,000. 18,000. Now, right now, we operate in what's called the hub and spoke model. We have 18,000 large businesses around the country that support the majority of the small businesses. That can create significant economic distress when any of the large businesses have economic issues, and a lot of the small businesses end up, it's one of the things that we deal with in Synthenai, they end up putting too many proverbial eggs in one basket of one large firm. So we like to see, and what we're starting to see around the country, is a decoupling from the hub and spoke model to a decentralized, where you have lots of small business and mid-sized businesses helping each other, and there's still a role for large businesses. There always will be. The fact is that manufacturing a washing machine is much better in a setting with thousands of employees where you can achieve true economies of scale. But we're moving to an information and service-based economy, which I think works a lot better in a decoupling. And the evidence is out there already. To give you one example, in the 1920s, the S&P 500, an average age of a company was 67 years. Today, it's less than 20. It is predicted that half of the companies on the stock exchange in the 2020s are companies you have never heard of today. In essence, this is a great thing. What innovation today, reduced barriers to entry, has afforded us is increased competition. So one company might be on top today, and they're forced to change and innovate. The ones who don't end up dying, giving way for new birth. So what are your chances of success? You have a 0.1% chance of ever getting to $250 million in revenue, and a 0.036, that's 1 in 3,000 chance of ever toppling $1 billion. The other way to think of this is that most companies are small, stay small, and that's not a bad thing, by the way. I'm not making a qualitative judgment. These are the facts. In fact, most companies, and you have to think about yourself, if you got to $100 million in revenue, I bet most people in this room and listening to this broadcast would be perfectly content and happy and think they're successful. So this is not a measure of success or not. These are just facts. One of the things that we find in the VC world and the investment world is people saying, I'm going to be the next Instagram. I'm going to be the next Facebook. Well, statistically, you're probably not. And I'm not trying to dash anybody's hopes, but I'm also trying to be realistic that you can change the world at $100 million in revenue. You can change the world without being the next Facebook, and most likely you won't. So the power to change the world is not tied to revenue. It's tied to passions, profits, and principles. So this number gets floated a lot. This is what it is. 70% of new employers survive 2 years. Half die in 5. 33% at least 10. And 25% 15. How do you change the business calculus? How do you change the calculus of failure? The answer is planning. Planning mitigates most of the risks that come from expansion and growth. And we're going to talk about that. So first of all, what is growth? For most people, this is what they think growth is. They think it's sales and marketing. They think, I need to grow my business. I want more clients, more services, more revenue. It's a two-dimensional graph line. Says, okay, over here after a certain period of time, I'm going to have more customers. Therefore, I'm going to have more money. That's great. That is not where growth happens within your organization. This is where growth happens within your organization. These are what we call the 7 pillars of business. These are the 7 essential business units you must steward in order to grow properly. In the 21st century business environment, your reputation is everything. And your reputation we define very simply. It's just your ability to deliver on the promise that you made in the marketplace. Now, sales and marketing is disproportionately the largest part of any budget of a small business, and I'm also going to tell you it should be. It 100% should be. Most of the activities in a small business should 100% be around sales and marketing. But if that's the only thing you're focused on, at some point you'll have a day of reckoning where you will be unable to deliver on the promise you made in the marketplace. Communications, finance, HR, IT, legal, operations. I'll give you just one really quick example. Most small businesses have very little need for HR. You've got a couple people, 3, 4, 5 people. It's fine. You're at 50% capacity, 60% capacity. Let's say you start growing. Things are going well. Eventually, you get to the point where you have to hire somebody. Imagine if that's the first time you're addressing any HR issues. You're going to pay them as a 1099, W-2, how much? Imagine if the very first time you consider those options are the time that you're growing. You're already at 110% capacity, which, by the way, doesn't exist. Nobody could ever be more than 100%, which means you have to take needed energy from performing the task that you already sold via your sales and marketing vehicle, figure out what you're going to do about HR, then dedicate to find the person that's going to deliver it. Where do you think that energy comes from? It comes from your ability to deliver. So the question is, where does IP engineering idea create? The middle. The middle is what happens. These are the 7 units that support all of the idea, the engineering, and the content. So the business is the center. You start with an idea. Doesn't matter what the idea is. I want to make an ice cream shop. That's the idea. And this is the kind of ice cream that I'm going to do. This is how you actually go to market, how you deliver on that. That's what the 7 pillars represent. So the IP, the ideas, all of the frameworks of the business sit right in the middle because that's what the business is. These are the 7 ways. A business has a function, right? So a business has a function. I want to do something. I want to get it out to the world, and then I want to deliver it. If you think about it, those are really the 3 essential parts of any business, any organization. I'm going to do something. I want to let the world know about it, so they're interested in it, and then I want to deliver it. So if you think of it like that, the business side of it is what you're going to do, and this is how you get it to market and how you deliver. Most people focus their energies on sales and marketing because they think getting the world to know about their product is sufficient. But if you can't deliver, and you create a host of problems, and you simply won't be in business in the competitive environment. So I talk about essential planning steps. So what mitigates some of the risks of business failure planning? So one of the things that I make every consultant of mine read is a military planning manual that comes from the U.S. Marines. It sounds like an unlikely place to find innovation, but it says wonderful gems, such as planning is a substitute for experience. If you've been somewhere before, there's no reason to plan. Think about going home. You don't make a plan. You don't look on Google Maps for your directions. You know where to go because you've been there and done that before. If you've been there, if you've done that before, there's no reason to plan. In fact, it could be a waste of your time. But if you're going into a place you've never been, if you lack the experience or foresight to understand what's going to happen, planning is a substitute for that experience. In my opinion, all businesses are going into a place they've never been before. By definition, growth itself is an expansion. Unlike a 2-dimensional line graph, it's a round ball that expands out. So they're all going into places they've never been before. But somewhere along the way, planning got a bad rap. And this is one of the things that I'm trying to change, and this is why I'm giving presentations like this. When most people think of plans, they think of almost like a college thesis. It's a big book, it's a plan, it's a set. First of all, I'll go back to the Marines. I'd say a plan is actually obsolete the moment it comes out because a plan only represents the actual actions given the information you have at that specific moment of time and how to get there. The plan is not important, the goal is important. This is from the Marines, not even from me. The goal of what you want to do is important. The plan changes every day. You find out different ways to do it. I mean, just referencing Lars is trying to change the world by bringing clean tech innovation around the world. I'm hoping I summed that up okay. The plan of how he does that. Today he's in New York. That's part of the plan. If he says, you know, New York's just not the right place to do this, I'm never going to go back to New York, I'm now going to focus on the Midwest or somewhere else, that's fine. His goal remains unchanged. The plan changes. The plan is supposed to change. In fact, anybody ever saying, I stick to the plan, is missing the entire point of planning. Planning is establishing the goal and understanding how to get somewhere, and that's it. The other thing I say is that planning is not a document. It's enjoying a glass of wine or beer or milk if you don't drink alcohol, and a crayon and a note and a Post-it note sitting in your kitchen. It's just the ability to think and envision. This is from the Marines again. Envisioning a place in the future where you want to be and the steps necessary to get there. There are 4 essential planning steps that every business must answer. And it is my opinion, if you cannot answer these 4 questions, you're running a hobby. Now, the good thing is you can put some time and energy and effort into it and fix this problem, but just make no mistake, these are the 4 things you have to answer. First is simple. What do you do? Now, this doesn't have to be sophisticated. In the beginning, you could get very unsophisticated, and eventually over time you could work the language, you test the market. It could change. That's fine. But you still need to know, what do? I want to help companies with their internal operations and finance. A solar company wants to help bring solar energy to the market. What do? You have to make that question. It's amazing, actually. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs, usually very early stage, that actually can't answer that question. Second question is, how are you going to do it? So, for example, one of the questions that we get all the time is what industries we focus on. And we don't, because we believe that business operations transcends all industries. But I'll be perfectly transparent with you. We've never done a manufacturing company. We've never worked with a manufacturing company. I think we can, but we haven't. So if I decided to say, you know what, we're going to completely focus on manufacturing, we're going to change Synthenai, and we're going to go right after manufacturing, well, I can't, because right now I don't have the experience or expertise. How am I going to do it? Well, the only answer would probably be to hire some consultants that specifically have manufacturing experience in order to go into that marketplace. Because if I don't, I can't just will myself anywhere. You can will yourself some places. You can will yourself a start. You can will yourself an introduction. I do not believe you can will yourself an implementation. So if you believe in yourself, I do believe you can get in the door, you can get the meeting, but you're never going to land the deal. That's what I believe. So how are you going to do it? What are your success metrics? So this is an interesting one. So metrics are very important in all of our businesses. Most of the metrics that people use will be sales, revenue, perhaps number of projects financed. We heard from Chris earlier. He's measuring some of the metrics by the megawatt or gigawatt hours that he's helped bring to market. One of your metrics must be qualitative. And this is a little controversial, and I'll usually get a comment or two, but it has to be qualitative, and let me explain to you why. Almost every quantitative metric that you have is lagging indicator. For example, one of the biggest measures of any business is sales. Sales is not a leading indicator. Sales is a lagging indicator. It only indicates that the sum course of actions you have taken over the last period of time, 6 months, a year, which have led to the current sales, worked. It tells you the state of history. It doesn't tell you whether your next quarter will be successful. For example, imagine having an amazing salesperson that just closed deal after deal, and they left. Like a rocket, the ship will continue to fly for a period of time. I mean, that person made some introductions, you've earned a certain reputation. But if that salesperson truly was remarkable, better than anybody you had, and I'm making it oversimplified, the fact is your sales will decrease. There's no question about it. So you have to pick a qualitative metric, something that represents the impact or change that you're making in the world. So there's some qualitative metrics, for my own company. It's length of relationships, because we've been working with some of our clients since the beginning for 5 years, the amount of time that we got rehired. But part of it's also the articles that I get written and published, and the presentations that I give as a qualitative metric. If I keep getting invited to events like this and other events, it means that I'm continuing to do the right things. And it can't be the only metric, and I'm not suggesting. I'm just saying one has to be qualitative, so it at least is a leading indicator to say, wow, I got a presentation lined up next month. I must be continuing to do the right things. I'll continue to do it. And one day if I don't, then clearly, okay, I need to reassess. And a financial model. Now, for Synthenai, we do very sophisticated financial models for our companies, depending. We help lead companies through funding rounds. We all help companies go through growth stages. They're trying to grow from 10 million to 50 million, so we'll have crazy spreadsheets. You don't have to start with that. You could start with very simple, what does it cost to do the thing I want to do? What am I selling it for? What's my profit? That's fine. I've met so many entrepreneurs that can't even answer that or don't even have a financial model. Oh, I'll figure it out later. Well, figure it out. You're in a business. Now, one thing, and I know some people here might be in a not-for-profit or for-purpose company. That's fine. But even if you're in a not-for-profit, you still have to get some fundraising. I mean, the money has to come somewhere. Nobody can eat for free. And so you have to at least understand this business. So again, having a good idea is not sufficient. You have to plan for success. So I'm going to give you just a couple. Is everybody good? I'm not going too fast. No questions? I'm going to give you a couple of frameworks and methodologies for how to foster innovation and entrepreneurship within your organization, no matter the size. So the first one I call deliberate action. So this is really simple. So in order to foster innovation, you have to have transparency. Transparency allows ideas to bubble up from wherever they are in the organization. But there needs something else besides that. That's great, transparency. I've worked with companies where their version of transparency was, ask me anything and I'll tell you. And they would, honestly, they would. I mean, if you go up to them and say, can I have a copy of the board minutes? They would give it to you. But it was a one-way transaction. No, if you really want innovation, you have to create an environment that's going to question and foster transparency and allow those ideas to spring and well up. But more importantly, and this is the most important, you have to have a reason for everything you do. Let that sink in for a second. Every single decision you make within your business context, you must have a reason. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're building a website and you decide on the color red. Make it really simple. Let's say you have no reason for picking that color other than you just needed to make a decision and you said red. Let's contrast that with red's my favorite color and that's why I chose it. Remember, I didn't say you have to have a good reason for everything you do, just that you have to have a reason. It's 6 months from now. Business is going okay. Website's doing some of what it needs to do. Business is being grown. And someone comes up and says, you know, it's found that 87% of people do not like the color red on websites. It's not true, I'm just making this up. And they really prefer blue better. Well, contrast that against the second reason. Well, I picked red because it's my favorite color, but if I pick blue, I could get more business. That's a no-brainer. Let's change it to blue. Contrast it against the first one that you didn't have a reason. Well, it's working, right? Our business is up 20%. Well, sure, but it could be up more. Right, but it might not be. And I don't have a reason. I can't test my hypothesis against anything in the known world because there was no reason for why I made the decision. Therefore, any external information you bring me is being subject against nothing. I don't change. Now, I have this per carve method. I'm not sitting there suggesting that you're deciding for lunch that you go through this. It's more about, one of the things I always say is we become what we practice. A lot of people, especially in the last century, talked about this work-life split. I don't split work-life. To me, I try to behave the exact same way in every single situation for one very simplistic reason. I'd like to be a decent, honest, truthful kind of person. I think all of us would. And if I continue to practice those behaviors in my business and my home life and as a father and as a husband, then I'll continue to be that way. So I try to do this in everything that I do. Remember, giving yourself a reason allows people to question it and come up with new ideas and allow the idea to expand. So I just established what's the purpose of the decision that I'm making. Do I understand the action of what I'm about to take? Do I understand the relevancy? Is this important? Do I understand all the necessary consequences for the decision I make? Do I understand the alternatives? Can I realize it? Can I make it happen? And can it be verified? So I'll walk you through the website, right? What's the purpose? Well, we need a color for the website. It needs something, right? So I understand the action. Okay, the action's very specific. The website is my business card, my forward-facing engine unit. That's going to be the colors associated with my company. Okay. Relevancy. Well, yeah, because I can't get my website built unless I pick a color, so clearly I need to make this decision. What are the consequences? Well, if I don't make the decision, I don't get a website. And I guess if I make a bad color, it's possible that, bad things can happen. So those are the consequences. Alternatives, well, I mean, the alternatives are red, blue, green, but there's no alternative. I can't not have a color. I have to choose something. The web designer is telling me to. Can I realize it? Well, yeah. As soon as I make that decision, the web designer will do it. Can I verify it? Yes, I can. So anybody have a better idea in the next few months, come talk to me, and we'll iterate and figure it out. Here's another very important thing about deliberate action. See, you have a reason whether you realize it or not, and that's something I always save for the end after I tell you this. So you actually have a reason, it's just whether you've identified it. So really this is just about stopping for 2 seconds and saying, why am I doing this? That's because behaviors betray intentions. Make no mistake. Behaviors betray intentions. We all have that person that we keep telling, oh, I'll meet you for lunch, I'll meet you for lunch, oh, I'll meet you for lunch, and you never do. At some point after a year, maybe you just have to get in touch with yourself saying, I don't want to meet that person for lunch. I believe transparency is a social lubricant. And although that stinks if I'm the end recipient of not wanting to, you not having time for me to go to lunch, trust me, on the recipient side, it's much better for you to tell me I'm just not sure when that's going to happen rather than me waiting every 3 months for a phone call where you keep canceling. Behaviors betray intentions. No matter what you say, your actions are much stronger. You need to align what you say and what you do. Often we say things, we do things, and there is not as much alignment as there could be. Behaviors betray intentions. How we act is what our heart tells us to. Now, we can override our heart and change our philosophy and do alternative things. I'm not suggesting that we always follow our heart. I mean, for the most part, yes, but we don't have to. I could decide, wow, I've really blown that person off for the last year, and I feel really guilty about that. I'm going to make sure that I make time for lunch in the next month. So I could make a rational, intellectual decision that overrides that, but understand that your behaviors betray your intentions. They're underlying your philosophy. That's what you do and how you're perceived. Satisficing. This is my favorite. So what is satisfice? So satisficing is it's a pretty cool concept, bears itself out in psychological studies. It's a decision-making model. What it basically says is when you're going to making a decision, let's pick an example. I'm going to buy a car. You should make a list of 4, 5, 6, no more than 7 things before you even look at your first car about what's important. I want 4 doors, I don't want leather, and I don't like the color green. Doesn't matter. Each person will have their own individual things. When I go out and buy the car, the argument with Satisfice is that I literally should buy the first car that fits that requirement. The first car that I come across that has 4 doors, is not green, and see, forget the third one, right? And the first one that I come across, I should buy immediately, like that. Research bears this out. The opposite of a satisficer is a maximizer. You know them as a perfectionist. The research is very, very, very clear. If you attempt to maximize decisions, if you attempt to be a perfectionist, you will take longer to make a decision and you will experience post-decision regret every single time, without fail. I did one of these talks and I had a person give me an email after, and it was a very kind and thoughtful email. And he was thanking me for the talk, and he said he had to buy a belt. And he said he was getting so frustrated with buying a belt because he was picking all the belts that he needed to buy, and then he stopped. He remembered the thing about satisficing. He took a Post-it note out. He wrote 3 things that he needs from a belt. He went back on the site, and he said within 3 minutes his transaction was done. And he was happy. Now, the cost for perfection, again, I try to get a little geeky about this. This actually bore itself out in something called 6 Sigma. I don't know how many people are familiar with 6 Sigma. So 6 Sigma is a manufacturing process, and I'm happy. I won't take up the time here. I'm actually finishing a book that'll come out in the fall that talks about agile processes as a management style, and it explores this concept of agility versus process-oriented behaviors. Just a really quick story. So 6 Sigma was born out of literally 4 centuries of business process. One of the best things that manufacturing has ever seen, and it's the concept of perfection. I think it's 6 parts out of a million, or 3 parts out of a million, that can be defective. So you can imagine that pretty much you're making something and it's perfect every time. But interestingly enough, something happened along the way that they realized, and what they realized was that as you approach perfection, innovation basically fell through the entire floor. 3M was one of the famous companies that innovated this and actually wrote this. It was a product manager that realized this and talked to the person, some of the people that had originally developed 6 Sigma. And they said, well, yeah, because 6 Sigma is to scale growth. It's not for innovation. And I'm going to show you why. So What is innovation anyway? We keep talking about this word and we don't understand what it is. At least I don't think a lot of people do. I've traveled the country. I ask different people for their definitions of innovation. I get a different answer anytime. Well, fortunately, the dictionary still has a definition. It is alternating between convergent and divergent thinking. This is where it kind of all comes together, right? So Six Sigma as a business process is designed to rid the system of divergence. Think about it. Let's say you're producing, go back to ice cream, maybe I'm hungry, I'm not sure. But let's say you decide to want to apply Six Sigma principle to ice cream. I want the exact cone to be exactly 3 inches. I want it to be a perfect circle every single time. You know, that's just the way I want it to be. So think about it. Six Sigma would actually get rid of anything that's not 3 inches and a perfect circle. It literally gets rid of divergence. This is a problem when it comes to innovation, because the only place that innovation comes from is divergence. So if you're making a cookie, convergent ingredients would be flour, sugar, milk. These are all things that nobody would disagree. Yep, that goes in a cookie. What would a divergent ingredient be? How about like dirt, lamb? None of those sound very good in a cookie. Most innovations are tweaks. It's very, very rare that there's truly a new idea, and I don't have a problem with that. In fact, I actually think that all that comes after must be inclusive of all that came before. I think one of the mistakes that we make in the innovation entrepreneurship is to truly think we have a new idea, and thus a book came out, 2004, Harvard, Blue Ocean Strategy. Very strong book. Some people, I think, have misinterpreted it to think, oh, I'm in a blue ocean. I have no competitors. I'm doing something that has never been done before. Therefore, I don't even need to research my competition. I don't even need to understand what's happened before because nobody's done what I've done. Well, they're throwing out a body of work for 4 or 5 centuries of business leadership process work. They're just throwing it out as if it's meaningless. People have come before you and done some of the things that you're trying to do. Some of the things you're trying to do, they haven't. I'm not disagreeing with that, but probably a majority they have. It pays to learn from people who have been there and done that, so you don't make some of the basic mistakes. Truly innovative people will realize that 1, 2, 3, 5% of what they're doing is the world has never seen, and they can't get help from that, and that's great. But 95% is the same. There's a company called Warby Parker. Have you ever heard of them? They're a company in New York that's trying to overthrow the billion-dollar eyewear industry. They're considered one of the disruptive innovations. Disruptive innovation is an innovation so disruptive it literally changes an entire industry. 5% of Warby Parker's business model is innovative. You know what the rest is? HR, IT, operations, all the stuff that makes business happen. I believe in iterative innovation, which is things can constantly change. Disruptive innovation, not everyone can participate. Not everyone can participate equally. Iterative innovation, everyone can participate. See, the next idea could come from the admin as easily as it could come from the CEO, as easily as it could come from legal. Ideas can come from anywhere as long as they're fostered correctly. One of the problems in innovation today is everyone's looking, again, for the next Facebook, for the next billion-dollar idea, and by doing so, they alienate some people. There are people within your organizations, and I mean this in no disrespect, and we all need them. There are people in your organizations that are simply not that innovative. They're not going to come up with the next Facebook, but they are going to come up with an idea that's going to save $5,000 or $1 million, and they are going to come up with a new way to do something, and they are going to participate. And we need to foster that equal participation from every level, no matter if the innovation is big and small, and we have to foster that, which means that innovation is the responsibility of the management team. It is us. It is the managers, the leaders of an organization to create a universe, their business, capable of engaging everyone. It's all about engagement. So this is how innovation works. Somebody doesn't just invent something. I mean, that's a beautiful, we have this beautiful theory, right? Thomas Edison, sitting in a shack, one day comes up with the right tungsten copper filament, and all of a sudden a light bulb's created, right? He did it 10,000 times. You discover something, so the initial discovery is, hey, if I run electricity across a filament, it glows. But then only through usage and modification does it truly become something new. Quick story, the Wright brothers. In 1903, the Wright brothers go down to North Carolina. Why did they choose North Carolina? Anybody know why they chose Kitty Hawk? 40-mile-an-hour continuous winds. So I'm going to make a supposition here. I don't think they invented an airplane. I think they took what they knew about bicycles, attached some wings to it, threw themselves off a hill with 40-mile-an-hour winds, and made it fly less than the length of a 747's wingspan. That's all they did in 1903. Think about it this way. In 1903, when the Wright brothers they went to a little restaurant that's still in existence, and they actually have the original telegram that marks achieved first powered flight. Still there in North Carolina. I've been there. They were the first two aeronautical engineers, the first two pilots. There were no other pilots in the world. It didn't exist, right? Because they had just invented the darn thing and had flown it 6 hours ago. Which means that anybody that would have to want to come into this new thing called airplanes would have had to come from a different specialty. Mechanical engineering, bicycle manufacturing, something else. It only was a few years later that what we knew as a modern airplane started to really take shape. It became less of a bicycle. It became more of this new thing. So usage plus modification over years and years, and eventually now a whole new industry was born. See, we can look back and say, oh, I know, it's the release of this one in 1906 or 1907. We could look back and say, there's the moment where it truly became something new. We can't do it while we're in the middle of it. So by the way, I mentioned cookies, right? So flour, sugar, and then I said lamb. So I was writing my chapter on this book in California, and I looked down and realized, I was actually writing the cookie story and realized I was eating a crepe. And the crepe was made out of sugar, flour, and lamb. In different proportions, in different ways, that which does not work does. That is innovation. What forces change? 3 quick things. Market forces. Apple is famous for saying 2010 the iPad. We all know this, that customers don't know what they want. We tell them, and they supposedly don't listen to market research. Well, that's not true. They do go their own way with the technology they bring, but they do listen to the market in terms of feedback and what to bring in the next generation and what have you. Market forces will always do things. I've been traveling for 9 months. Lars is traveling for the last 3 or 4 years. We learn things just by talking to people. Some of that affects us. Some of it doesn't. Some people tell us things that are not worth anything, and some people tell us things that are worth a lot. That's market influence. Ability. So again, if somebody said, you guys are great, you guys should go right into manufacturing. I'm exposing a weakness to my business, right? I don't have that ability right now. We do in some limited capacities, but if they said we should change the entire organization, I don't have that ability right now. So one of the things that affects change is ability. Now, there's a famous story in IBM in the 1920s where the guy basically willed the company and said, we're going to do this. Some people jumped on board, some people didn't. He eventually built the company. But he was able to convince enough people with ability to help bring his idea to realization. The point is, you should do a gut check. Okay, this is what I'm supposed to do, but am I capable of doing it? And by the way, if I'm not, I could figure it out, but be in touch with that. I don't know if you expected that one, but this is an important one for business. Intuition. If you've had any success in your life in any arena, personal or professional, chances are it's because your gut had some impact that allowed you to do something. Certainly, I do not believe that intuition should be the primary and only driving force for every decision, but it is an important one that you need to listen to. Intuition sometimes is our subconscious taking the ideas in our head and innovating. Last but not least, expectation and frame setting. The purpose of any organization is to affect change. Think about that. You want to manufacture something, build something. No matter what you do, you're putting together an idea, a service, or a product. We have responsibilities as leaders of organizations to create the rules of that universe. Our company can be any way that we want. And when I mean any way, I mean any way. Point in case Bernie Madoff. You can literally form an organization around whatever you choose to do. It doesn't have to be legal. It doesn't have to be ethical. The point is that you control the rules of that universe. It's as if your organization is a little pocket universe within ours, capable and subject to potentially its own ethics, rules, morality. We shape that through culture and through leadership. And here's the 3 ways that shapes it. So what's the purpose of the organization? What's the behaviors of the organization? So, here's an example. Let's say that our purpose was to bring clean, sustainable energy, but in our behaviors, we're all driving around in terrible, large SUVs that get 8 miles to the gallon. What do you think eventually happens to the organization if everybody did that? The stated goals are the ones that you say. So taking this further, I'm going to build a sustainable organization. These are my behaviors, which clearly don't represent a sustainable organization. And then I'm going to say, and we need to grow revenue 20% next month. Well, they become disconnected, disjointed. I don't understand. So there's your purpose that you're trying to be, your stated goals that you state, and your behaviors. They create the rules of the universe. Your job as a leader is to remove obstacles. Energy and innovation should be spent on bettering the organization, not overcoming hurdles. And at the beginning of the conversation, I tried to tell you how this conversation was going to go by. And I also said that with the figures, that I kind of get excited about the figures. And I've given this all across the country, and I usually get the same result. When I don't do that, sometimes I'll test. You'll see people fiddling with their phone. Statistics and figures are better. But when you tell them what's coming, everyone pays attention. See, people are a lot simpler than we give them credit for. They just want to know what you expect. Even if you don't know what's coming, they just want to know what you know. They want to feel they're informationally on the same playing field as you. So you have the power to frame the world in whatever you want. Set correct expectations, communicate changes, and reset expectations if needed. This is what everything is about. This is how you win in the marketplace. This is how you win in business, and this is how you innovate. You always create expectations, you communicate quickly, openly, and transparently, you reset, and you deliver on the promise that you made. As soon as you know you can't deliver on the promise, you let people know. Right. Yeah, so the comment was about the consistency within an organization. And that comes from communication, that comes from the behaviors, which I think is very important, and the culture that exists within a company. I'm editing the book on communication chapter, and I have a friend of mine who's a professor, and he's writing it, and we were talking about pretty high-level, hierarchical communications. And one of the things he was saying was, it seems to me you're simplifying the argument a little bit, because when most people speak, I send the message, you're the receiver. I have an agenda, you have an agenda. Those agendas create noise and create distraction between us. And I said, that's exactly my point. But the more open and transparent we are, the more aligned we are with our behaviors, our stated purposes, the more aligned our communications can be. That I'm a sender, you're a receiver, and I could send a message, and we'll have the same agenda because we're open and transparent. And if not, if we created a culture where you don't fully understand or you're kind of confused, you're going to state your agenda to me, and I'll understand and be able to respond and or react to it. Always deliver or exceed on expectations. That's the only way to win. Okay. Does anybody have any more questions?
Good job.